jump into our intro here. So hello everyone and good evening. Before we begin, I just want to note that tonight's talk is being recorded. My name is Svetlana Yashkova and I sit on the advisory board of the Carolyn Campagna Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum at Cal State Long Beach. We acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands, and are grateful to have the opportunity to work for Cal State Long Beach at the sacred site of Puvu Na. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and our relatives and relations past, present, and emerging. I am very excited to welcome Maren Hassinger this evening, our second speaker in the Material Concerns lecture series. The proceeds from this series help support the museum's collection acquisitions, and we'll share a potential acquisition slate with you later this winter, with you, the participants and members of the public, so that we can get some feedback on which pieces we might want to acquire. If you received a ticket to this lecture as a gift, I ask that you please consider making a gift to our museum for $5 or more. There's going to be a link in the chat for that. And finally, if you haven't already, I encourage you all to check out our YouTube channel, Kleefeld Contemporary, and follow us on Instagram at the Kleefeld. For tonight's lecture, I ask that you please remain muted while Maren speaks. And after the lecture, there will be a Q&A portion where you will have the opportunity to ask questions. And now a quick intro for our speaker. Maren Hassinger was born in Los Angeles. She received her BA from Bennington College in Vermont and her MFA from UCLA. Maren was the Emeritus Director of the Rinehart School of Sculpture at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, which she led for 20 years. During a career that has spanned more than 4 decades, Maren has explored relationships between the industrial and natural worlds in a practice that is both meditative and critical. Currently, her work is focused on exploring issues of equality. Please join me in welcoming Maren Hassinger.
Thank you, thank you. So let's dedicate this to the Tonga people. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. Slide 1. Is that how I do it, or do I click? Oh, okay. So here's what I last saw when I was on your campus, which is the evening shadows that you've moved to another location now, I guess. But the whole idea was in this piece to recognize this jacaranda tree and, you know, what happens in the evening with the trees shadow being cast and the wire rope shadow being cast. And there's kind of an equality among those two things, even though one is living and one is made by nature and one is not living and it's made by people. But I really enjoyed making this, and I enjoyed the way it looked, and I was very happy to hear that it's still here, because 93 is a while ago. Okay, so we're going to start, and it's going to be more or less chronological. And here I am at the beginning of my college education at Bennington College, in my studio working on my BA thesis. So I made maquettes, and then I proceeded to enlarge them to full scale and put them in a meadow that was enclosed. And this is one of those pieces. And that was way back in 1969. Ugh. Okay, next. Oh, if you want to stop me at any point to ask a question, you can do that. Yeah, okay. So then just a few years later, in 1972, I found myself as an MFA student at UCLA in fiber structure. And I had set out to be a sculpture major. And for some reason, the sculpture department didn't accept me, but Bernard Kester, who was heading up this new graduate school in fiber structure, asked me to join. And I said, okay, because at some point I needed an MFA in order to teach. And Bernard turned out to be just a terrific mentor and friend, just terrific. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to work with him. And so this piece, believe it or not, was actually made in 1972. It's from rope, hauling line rope. And we went down to the the shipping yards and got this used rope. And then I found a man who knew how to splice it, and I asked him to splice it, and he thought I was crazy because usually you only splice things enough so that they can pull a boat. And I had him doing all these decorative splicings. And but the thing is, this year, the Guggenheim bought it. I mean, it's a little unbelievable, but they did. And it's in a very nice show now with other people like Richard Serra. So I guess you just have to wait. Okay, next one. So this is how it looks at the Guggenheim. And the show is called Knotted, Torn, and Scattered. I've increased the number of loops and knots and things to fill that particular space. But it has a very nice quality to it. There's air conditioning on, you know, and it sort of sways a little bit. It's very calming, considering the fact that everybody now comments on the fact that there are a series of nooses, which I hadn't thought about. You know, I was thinking about hauling ships, but they are in fact nooses. Next. And this now precedes a whole kind of chronology of what I did from graduate school onwards. So I started out using wire rope. Next slide. Because I was in a weaving department, and I had to figure out like what material was I going to use that would make it right that I was in a weaving class. So I found this material one time in a junkyard on Alameda Boulevard, and it was just rotting away in a corner. And I thought, wow, if I use this, it would be like yarn, except that I could weld it and it would last and I could do all kinds of things with it. So that's what basically happened. And then all the rest of the stuff that I did and thought followed. Next. And I mentioned earlier that when I went to Bennington College as an undergraduate, I didn't want to be a sculpture major. That was by default. I really wanted to be a dance major. And fortunately, at this time in the early 70s, there were artists who had begun to make performance works. And so I was able to do my dancing. And I met another artist in LA, Sangan and Goody, and she was constantly wanting me to do things, you know, using the pantyhose material that she used all the time. So I actually like got to be a dancer kind of after all. So these are two pieces from that same show at Arco Center for Visual Art, which was like the first really noticeable show that I had in LA. And these are my friends, and we're doing this impromptu improvisational movement piece with my work. and I called it high noon because it was at noon. And, like the woman who has the dress and the sort of stacked heels, well, she was like an employee in the curatorial department or something like that. Anyhow, I was grabbing people, and we had from Manitas de Plata, who was a Spanish guitarist of Cante Hondo, that was playing in the background. So it was very dramatic situation. Next slide. And if you have anything you want to ask and interrupt me, it's hard to just keep talking. I don't know whether I'm saying what you want to hear or want to know or whatever. But anyhow, I continued living in Los Angeles, and I got the opportunity to work with Brockman Gallery Productions to do outdoor work that was sponsored by the highway system in LA. And in part, it was sponsored by the highway system. And so I got to know some of those people. And I also got to think about, what kinds of things I would actually do in landscape with faux landscape parts. So I did two pieces. One they decided to take down right away because they decided they were going to put a hotel at the site of where the Sunset Boulevard meets the Hollywood freeway. So I had to take that down almost immediately. And they never did put a hotel there. There's not a hotel there now. So, and this was the other one that I did that lasted over 20 years. It lasted until they put a new bridge in at Mulholland Drive. So this is on the San Diego freeway northbound. And it's called 12 Trees. And I thought the whole time that it would remind people to be careful with nature, or this is what we're going to end up with. Next. And this one, a little bit later, was shown at the Southwest College Art Gallery. And at the time, Carrie James Marshall was the curator, and he's the one who lit this way. And I thought it was just such a fabulous lighting job that it gave a kind of horror to this simple arrangement of wire and concrete. Very, very dramatic, very wonderful. Next. And well, time now is starting to just kind of move on. Let me see what's happening. In 1987, I've already moved to the East Coast and I'm living there pretty much. In 1982, which is the image on the right, I did the LA County Museum show in a small room upstairs. It was part of something called Gallery 6, I think. And it was supposed to be spooky and dark, and I started using all these shadows, and I put the bushes close together. And on dangerous ground literally meant that. I mean, it meant that it was dangerous. If you didn't watch where you were walking, you were going to run into it and scratch yourself. But also because for me, a museum is a dangerous place because it's the place that tells you what's art and what isn't art, what's part of culture and what isn't part of culture. And that is a very dangerous place. And literally, it did seem dangerous because it was close together, sticky things. And then I kind of repeated that a few years later for Art Park. And the thing about this art park I learned so much from is that Niagara Falls was right around the corner. And this land here is so ruined. We couldn't even dig down more than about 6 inches because it's a landfill and it covers toxic waste. So, it's just like also dangerous ground. Okay, next. And so this isn't really chronological, but it does kind of give you an idea of some other ways I might have approached doing public work outdoors. And this one imitates, like sparse growth on beaches. And we're right in Lower Manhattan. The whole site now is grown over with buildings. And I planted these individual links based on how the wind was blowing the few little bits of vegetation at the site. Next.
Maren, can I ask you a question? This is Paul.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you sort of arrived at this interest in sort of the land, this sort of ruined land, dangerous land? I should maybe preface my question. I recently, maybe against my better interest, revisited Parable of the Sower, which always disturbs me for months after I read it. This is Octavia Butler. I don't know if you've ever read it.
I haven't read it.
Okay. It's oh, I'm hearing in the comments other people have read it. So Octavia Butler, she was based in the Pacific Northwest, but she started this trilogy and she was able to complete the first 2 books before she passed away. And Parable of the Sower takes place in a not too distant future LA that is on fire, is ruined, that is divided between the haves and the have-nots, and there's these gated communities, and there's a sort of dystopian futurism to what she's writing about. Yeah. And as you're talking, that these sort of things are resonating for me, and I'm wondering if that's where your mind was when you were thinking about this, or sort of how you arrived at this kind of conceptual thrust.
Well, I just feel like nature is endangered. I mean, in the same way that she did, that Octavia Butler did. I mean, all we have to do is look around and see how we've destroyed things to make buildings. So it's a population problem, and it's also a problem with the way we think about nature. The land around us, we have no regard for. It's all about development. I mean, don't you feel that's true? I mean, no, yes?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do. Sorry, I was still muted. Yeah, no, I do. And I think I'm always interested, particularly in Los Angeles. I have family roots here and spent a lot of time as a kid. And when I moved back, I had a lot of friends say, why would you move there? It's full of traffic. And, there's all this, there's buildings everywhere and highways everywhere. And that's true. But I also often find myself reminding people of all of I think of LA as a sort of garden city. Like I kind of see past all of the human intervention on the landscape.
Well, it's really spread out,
Super spread out. But I'm acutely aware of how, if we're not careful, what sort of amazing beauty we have left will just, it's just gone. When I go to the beach, I think we see dolphins every time we go to the beach, every time. And it's so amazing to me. But I also every day see people dropping litter in front of my house. Right. And those two things are connected for me. And I sort of think there's, I hope this isn't offensive, but there's almost, when you were talking about the trees, the installation you did on the San Diego freeway, there's almost a sort of Blade Runner element to that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's totally like negative, but it's also very attractive, I think, because the material, has that. And I know exactly what you're talking about how human beings they can just do some really, unspeakable, ugly things. I live on a corner where people, when the pandemic, started, they were like freaked out and out of work, and they just stayed up all night partying and taking drugs and screaming and getting in fights. And that's only stopped recently because it got too cold to do it, but they're still out there somewhere, inside doing all that. The things that happened as a result of this pandemic have really shown the true nature of things, I think. Nature isn't the right word, the true way of things, and a lot of the meaning of things, unfortunately. But I can't forget that, even though I'm talking about like the problem of vanishing nature, that all the while I'm making it with something very attractive. So these are aesthetically pleasing, even though they're supposed to be cautionary. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. I don't know if Svetlana caught it, so I'll ask it, but Christina Newhouse was asking if you felt affinities with Mary Miss.
Mary Miss. I know Mary Miss. We were in some shows together. No, not 100%. No.
Could I ask
Although
a comment?
remember her work.
Svetlana?
Yeah,
Is it
Michael,
okay to
go for
comment?
it. Yeah, Michael, go for it.
I showed at Art on the Beach in 1980, at the same time as you did.
Yeah, I recognize your name and your face. Yeah.
But what I remember about this site, and it's kind of pertinent to you maybe now, it brings it very current, is that this sand that was here, if you remember, was the foundation dirt from the World Trade Center.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that dirt, this whole area was not there when they started to build the World Trade Center. They built a wall, and filled it with this dirt. This was the oldest section of New York. And as you dig down, you could get the first inhabitant detritus, dishes, pieces of, it was an amazing thing.
Oh.
I think it was the only, we called it, when I was working down there, we called it the beach. And it was so incongruent to, as you would say, I'm going to the beach. And this was known at that moment as going to the beach in New York City.
Right.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful. That was wonderful, but there's no beach anymore.
No, it's all built out.
Yeah. Well, Michael, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. We haven't seen you since you did the installation.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a comment about the location.
Okay.
The sun is interesting because that's part of the site specificity of the piece itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the shadow on the wall and how's it work. So it's not quite sighted the same way now.
No. I mean, it's unrecognizable. I couldn't even tell you what cross street this is.
Where? And
Where this is.
where, this in New York?
Yeah.
I was talking about sort of the piece that you have at Long Beach. But anyway.
Oh, the Long Beach one.
Yeah.
What about it?
Oh, with the way it's set up on the property, I noticed that you call it, what was the title you had for that piece?
Evening Shadows.
Evening Shadows. And right now, the Evening Shadows would not be doing what they're doing anyway. Just a comment.
Yeah, well, maybe when it gets set up properly, there will be a wall that they can cast a shadow on.
Yeah, maybe there'll be a chance to do that. That'd be great.
Yeah, might be midday shadows.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Okay, so This is something I'm doing now in Aspen Art Museum. And I just wanted to show you that same idea of being kind of windblown. You know, I kept thinking of that and doing various pieces that related to the idea of wind. And pink became very important. Next. And the reason why it became important is it seemed kind of elemental after this thing happened. So myself and my dance teacher, Charles Abramson, at the time, I got this job from a group of people from CalArts called Foundation for Art Resources to go do something about this neighborhood. It was me and several other people. Do something about this neighborhood, which is overrun with wild dogs, because they meant to put a freeway here and they demolished all the houses except for like those couple of little ones you see in the background. And all the people moved out and they left their dogs, and the dogs are running wild. And it was a horrible place. It was horrible. They finally built the freeway, but it was years later. And I don't know why, but I got some pink paint and I started painting the abandoned walkways. They're driveways. These aren't streets. These are actually driveways that led up to people's homes. And the photograph is fading now and it's a funny time of day and everything, but I found out when I put this pink paint down and it was next to the grass that was growing wildly at the sites from the leftover lawns, I guess, I found that the pink became pinker and the green became greener. And it was actually, you know, art theory at work, color theory at work. Next slide. And after doing the pathways, I did several pieces that, you know, had to do with the color pink, that had to do with that color theory that I learned by doing it. I did not learn color theory by reading about it. I learned by seeing it, which I think is like different. Anyhow, this is a piece from Art Across the Park from 1982. I went to 3 parks and I had this pink outfit on. I had gathered pink detritus from LA and then took it in this pink bag to New York, and then went on the subway uptown and sprinkled it around in an area that I guess was probably, you know, 30 or 40 feet by 30 or 40 feet. It was in 3 parks. Next. And of course, this idea of scattering crap is exactly, you know, what we all do. And it's how we can take some place that's really meant to be for lots of people and spoil it just by being pigs. I mean, the things that I actually picked up from Central Park before I put down my trash, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable what people do. And so it was a kind of way of, again, reminding us to be more mindful of how we treat our surroundings. I repeated this, you know, 20, whatever it was, 30 years later. And this time it was in a park in Brooklyn, Prospect Park. Next. And here are some of the other pink things I've done. At Art and Practice, I know some of you mentioned that you had been to the Art and Practice show. I think Catherine mentioned she'd been there. And this was an area in the front of the gallery that's just, it was a strange narrow space behind the picture window, which you see from the outside. And I decided to fill it with these pink bright, hot pink plastic bags. They're shopping bags. I think they're made to be shopping bags. And inside of them, I put a little note that says love. You can see it in the bag on the right. And I've done this kind of site-specific installation in many places. The one in the center is at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And it's a way of showing you how high the ceiling really is. Next. And this one was slightly different in that I didn't use the plastic bags, but I did use the color pink, and I made a canopy, and it has pink light emanating from it. And the idea is that if you're under this pink light, then everybody under it is pink. And we don't have to worry about any kind of racism or division. We're just all pink. Next slide. Then I got, because the New York Times is the paper of record, I started doing a lot of works with the New York Times. This is their, logo. This is what you know when you pick up that newspaper that it's been around for a while. Okay, open. And so basically women's work was a way I started using the newspaper. And it was simply, women, wherever I was doing a show, we would get together, we'd be in a line, we'd strip down the newspaper, then we'd twist it together, then we'd join all of our twists, and then we'd make a big ball out of that or something else. And it went on and on for a lot of years and a lot of shows. And the picture on the right is the end of a show, which was a very, very large show about performance. And in this, my friend Ulysses, who's second from the right, decided to join us. And I thought it was just so fabulous. So that now it's not just women who can do women's work. Okay, next. And another iteration is on the right, this mandala, which is twisted and bound and then wrenched into this circle some kind of way, so that it becomes a mandala. And you want to go back again. And the one on the left are sit-upons. And the sit-upons are really important to me historically from when I was a child in Campfire Girls, all the way till now, like I can make stacks and stacks of them, and they're like mushrooms springing up in a gallery, and you can sit on them. And I feel like all of those, like these two things, using newspapers like this Times, which is the paper of record, I feel like it's an attempt to bring us all together or to show the closeness of our relationship in ways that maybe we just take for granted. Okay, next. And this was a show in Chicago this year. And this piece also was made out of newspapers and mounted on chicken wire. And it became like the river, the Chicago River, which divides the city. And it's a political river because it divides, I guess I'm not sure whether it's east and west or north and south, but it divides the city. And it also politically divides economic situations and racial situations. Next. Okay, so video. I wanted to be a dancer, and that didn't happen, but I did do performance works. And I also was madly in love with film and continue to be madly in love with it. And so I try to be a filmmaker from time to time. And that's what this video section is about. My daughter, who's an artist and is a great photographer and video person, helped me make this and collaborated with me, and we often collaborate. And our friend Nicholas shot this. And this happens to be an installation and gallery show in a corner where I use some of the fabric from the show in, to be a continuation of the film. So it's not just a film. It's a film that happens and becomes something real in the room. But other times I've just used straight film, no installational aspect at all. Next. These are from that. Wind was, it was video, and it was also Super 8, and the Super 8 camera was slightly broken. So there was strange light that was kind of emanating from it. And that, I thought it made it quite interesting, actually. And these are just various fabrics that Ava collected. Next.
Maren, can I ask you another question? This is Paul again. You mentioned a couple times, you've said some iteration of, I wanted to be a dancer. Yeah.
There's all kind of things I wanted to be that I never got to be, that I did anyway. So
yeah, I think that's really a fascinating thing to hear from someone. I mean, I guess one of my questions is like, well, are you a dancer? Or is the wanting to be a dancer sort of part of the material? Is the want a material for you? If that makes sense.
The wanting. Well, the wanting was part of the desire to be this dancer. And my idea of a dancer was Martha Graham. That's, when I was in school, it was Martha Graham, and later it was others. But, I really wanted to do that. I wanted to have a company of dancers, but they wouldn't even let me take technique classes. So, okay, I get it. But it was terrible when that happened. I just broke down in tears. I just thought, oh, I'm going to leave this place. It's so horrible, blah, blah, blah. And then, somehow I ended up staying because I had a drawing teacher, Pat Adams, who said, your artwork is good. You should stay and major in art.
Mm-hmm.
So
is there a melancholy to that?
I think there probably is, but I use dance as much as I can.
Yeah.
And it shows up as a sense of motion in the pieces.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems interesting to me, especially like next to some of the work that you're doing with nature, that there's also a sort of melancholic element to that too, of kind of mourning something that isn't yet lost.
Yeah.
Right? That's really fascinating to me.
Yeah. It's just being sad about something and nostalgic, it's just feeling like somehow you were thwarted, that there were powers that be that didn't let you do what you wanted to do. So it all gets mixed up with struggle, Mm-hmm. But finally, I'm very, very happy that I can be an artist of any kind, but I'm really happy that I'm a visual artist, because I think I can communicate better that way. I think that people understand, my misery about the environment and the way we treat one another, and the way I'd like us to be together as people and not apart and separate and fighting. And I think that those are really important for the ongoingness of our civilization. And I'm not sure I'd be able to talk about those things in dance.
Yeah.
Or a poem, or a book. Somehow I think that art has worked out.
That's a powerful lesson, actually.
Yeah. Well, actually, the lesson is don't stop. That is the lesson. If you are interested in something, do not stop. And at least my generation, we were always told, oh, you can't do that. No, but look who you are. You got to go be a lawyer. You have to be a doctor. You have to, you can't do that. Don't ever let anybody tell you, no, 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 you can't do that. You have to do what you can do. I couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer. I couldn't. That would not have happened. I mean, really. Now I can be a ballet dancer before I can be a lawyer, okay? So really, But it's hard growing up, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're dealing with students all the time who are trying to grow up.
Sure.
So, it's tension.
Yeah. And I think there's maybe an additional element of melancholy in that while we're trying to grow up, in the process of that, we learn that what we think is growing up is not actually what growing up is. If that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That, we have these notions of what adultiness looks like.
Yeah.
But as we become adults, we realize that what we thought being adult is not adults at all. Right?
Right.
And you have to, I think, come to terms with that as an adult. You have to come to terms with what you thought you were growing into is not at all what you should have grown into or what growing into is. And you had to deal with that loss, I think.
Yeah, I think that there are losses to be dealt with, but what matters is the area in which you can make the most meaningful contribution, I think. And I honestly think that I ended up where I was supposed to be, by accident, maybe, or listening to people that knew more than I did, or just taking advantage of what was given and not what was denied.
Right.
Okay. More. Somebody said something about determination. Okay, so then I did a whole bunch of pieces that literally had to do with the nature that I was always talking about saving. Next, that's a site-specific installation. And this one is the beginnings of ideas about making branches into sculptures. So then the next slide, yeah. So then finally in 2018, the Studio Museum in Harlem asked me to do a series of pieces throughout this Marcus Garvey Park, which is in my neighborhood. It was terrific to be able to walk to work like this. And I really wanted to make these banners with photographs on them of everybody, who came to the park, all the visitors, everybody in the neighborhood. And I was telling it to one of the residents of the neighborhood. And he said, oh, photographs. No photographs. And I was so disappointed. And then I realized he was a drug dealer and that there were a lot of drug dealers in the park and they didn't want their photographs, like 12 feet high. So we ended up going for the branches, which were, I'm not exactly sure how people felt about these branches, but they didn't disturb one. And at the end, a homeless man began living in the center of the one on the right. So he enjoyed his moment there. Yeah, so, and these have been taken apart. There were 8 of them. And one of them now is at the is at DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. And you're going to see a slide of that next, I think, maybe, or next. Yeah. Okay, so here we are putting up this, and it's overlooks DuPont Circle, and a man, Stephen, who was a former student, built the armature, and then other students like James over here standing next to me, he came and helped stuff it with branches. My daughter is here. My assistant is here. We're all here stuffing branches into this wire grid. And next slide. And so it's standing there like this strange naturalistic beacon. And after we finished putting it up, we went to have lunch across the street, and we ran across some homeless tents. You know, they give tents to homeless, and there were these green pup tents, and they were exactly the shape of this. And I hadn't seen them before. And I was so overjoyed because it made me realize that there were things in the neighborhood that were related in terms of shape and size, and but also they were related in terms of dealing with the now and the present and the reality of things. And I felt really happy about that. I felt like it was, my intuition was working, and I felt that was a good thing. Next, I think are we at the end here? Was that the last slide?
Yeah, that's the last one.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Oh, perfect. Okay. Did I get into the right amount of time?
I think so. We've Svetlana can help us open up the conversation a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Maren, thank you so much for this presentation.
It was totally my pleasure. I hope I haven't bored people to death, and I hope somehow or another I get a chance to meet you all someday, and we can keep the discussion going.
Likewise. You said a really interesting phrase when you were talking about the piece in New York. You said that area is now overgrown with buildings, and I really love that, and it's such an interesting way of putting it. Kind of flips it on its head,
Well, that's New York. It always overgrows with buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open this up to the Q&A portion now. And the way that we have been doing it is I ask that everyone remains muted. And if you want to ask a question, you can either physically raise your hand, or there's an option on Zoom to do it virtually as well. And then once you're called, I'll ask you to unmute yourself so you can ask your question. And you can also feel free to type it in the chat box, which it looks like we already have some questions there. So I'm going to go ahead and read first one.
Okay.
From Bill. It says, evening shadows is a favorite among students when I give campus sculpture tours as a grad student. They meditate on it while studying through the window of the Horn Center, especially at sunset. They often ask if this is inspired by wheat fields you encountered.
No wheat fields in LA or New York. Or even Baltimore. That's the places I've lived in. But I can fantasize about wheat fields, so it could be a fantasy wheat field. But when I say a field, I actually mean a field of growing things, and maybe even things we might eat, like wheat field. But I make it out of wire rope. So, I think the material tells you what I'm thinking about fields, which is that they are few and far between and being replaced by, you know, manufactured fields. Yeah. Of one sort or another. So I guess it's like poetic, right?
Mhm. Thank you. We have another question from Carol. Are the newspaper structures meant to deteriorate over time?
No. No. I want them to last and last and last. And oddly, because they've been taken care of and they've, you know, been in the right kind of light levels and they haven't gotten wet and stuff, they've lasted quite a long time. What generally happens is after a very long time, they start to yellow. And I think that has to do with, you know, just the fact that it's newsprint. You know, it's not high quality paper. But I don't want it to go away. I want it to be like that. And it looks weird, but those sit-upons stacked up are very comfortable. Kind of sink into them. Yeah.
There's actually a question about the sit-upons. What is the inspiration for them? It's from Helen.
From being a campfire girl and making sit-upons for our powwows at the end of, you know, our day camp sessions. So you would make one and you would sit on it and it would separate you from the damp grass, you know, that you were sitting on. But I just decided, you know, since I was always into repetition, that I just make a lot. So I made a lot and then I put them in different shows, even in museum shows. And then I told people they could sit on them and people sat on them. And they're actually quite comfortable because they give for your weight, but they don't put you on the ground. Yeah.
Can I tag on to that, Svetlana? Maren, can you, I have two questions. I'm going to put them both in front of you. You can do what you want with them.
Okay.
One, which is not tied to Carol and Helen's question, but I'll bring it back to Carol and Helen's question. One, you know, when I reached out to you to see if you would do this talk, one of the things that you said sort of right away is that you wanted it to be conversational.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about why that's so important to you. And then my second question, which is not related, but related to Helen and Carol's question is, you know, as I was looking at your images, I love Eva Hesse. I love her work. I think it is amazing. I love writing about it. And I wonder how much she sort of sits in your consciousness as you're making, and moreover, like how, you know, one of the things that I think about in relationship to Eva Hesse is like, how did she give herself permission to work with these materials that are so alive? And I'm curious how you decided to give yourself permission, how you gave yourself permission to work with these materials that are unusual certainly in museums, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so that's two different questions, but, you know, I'm famous for that.
Well, I think that I've always really admired her work. She was a big inspiration, but I don't like icky things and I don't like toxic things. And her toxic things, I think, undid her. I think they probably contributed to her early death. But I have to say, I was really nearly moved to tears because the Chicago Art Institute bought that early piece of mine that's like a loop that goes back on itself, and you know, it's the loop that goes like this. The curator sent me a photo of how he had hung the piece, and he hung it next to an Eva Hesse piece. So, you know, that just took my breath away. I couldn't believe it. But so I think she was a wonderful genius and a great sense of humor, evidently, and gone too soon, but really, really influential, because she could take like a movement like minimalism and make it poetic and personal. That's what was so important about her, the personal part of it. And you can feel that when you look at the work, you can feel the personal part of it. And that's like when you read a book, you know, when you read a novel and somebody is telling you about, you know, this situation in the world and how it affects them. And then, you know, you can just, you're there and you're learning something by being there. And that would be what I'd like to do with my work too. I want it to be informative or real or something, you know. I want it to be something that is helpful. Yeah. And as far as, you know, like the idea of all of us talking together, well, that's how it can be helpful, if it starts a dialogue that we can all talk about our own selves and our own work and how we're managing, you know, moving forward as artists in the world and stuff like that. That's not going to happen if I'm up here beating my chest and saying I'm the, you know, greatest artist that ever walked, you know, and I'm not interested in that. And I don't believe that. I believe that, you know, I had some ability to do this and I stuck with it. If there's one thing I know I am good at, it's sticking with things for a long time, even beyond, you know, like, doesn't make any sense. What are you doing that for? But I would stick with it. So, I mean, I'm good for that. I admit to that. All the rest of this stuff, you know, it's just work. It's just doing it. Yeah. And then, you know, like having a point of view, which sometimes takes a long time to have.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you don't read a book if it's not about anything. So I think it's the same with all the arts.
Thank you. We have a comment from Amanda. Says, thank you for the lovely talk, Maren. I love learning about your work. I was also a campfire girl, and the sit-upons brought back warm memories.
Right, warm memories of hard ground.
We have another question from Wenny. Museum is a dangerous place to tell us what art is or what art is not. So what do you think art is?
Dangerous place? What is a dangerous place?
A museum.
Oh.
So a museum is a dangerous place to tell us what art is or what art is not. So what do you think art is? And according to your definition of art, what kind of role should a museum play?
Well, although I think that museums are dangerous places because they are the arbiters of taste, that's why they're dangerous. And they would attempt to tell you what's the right thing. You know, this is how this is. This is art. They tell you this is art. And what if you're wanting to be an artist and you go and look at that and it's not anything that you're doing? Are you going to be put off by that, or are you just going to keep going? You know, how are you going to talk about that experience you had? That's all I meant. I mean, you just sort of can't listen to anybody. You just have to keep doing. If that's what if you want to do something in the field of the arts, whatever it is, you have to have an opinion that you are going to do it regardless. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it turns out that you could be very helpful to others.
She also says, I really love the way you said, don't stop.
Yes. main message with anything, you know, like when you're cleaning house and you feel like, oh my God, this will never be right. You have to keep going. You know, when you're tired and you got to walk that extra mile to get to your house, you've got to do it.
I just love it. I love the way you knock at the table. I think it's wonderful.
The way I did the table? What?
Yeah, it just, when you say, you know, don't stop, I heard something. You knock on the table, right? Yeah,
Okay.
I just
All
love it. I just
Okay.
love it.
Okay, Winnie, now you don't stop.
Yes.
All right.
I love it. I just like your expression, you know. I mean, just feel that, you know, it's kind of a lot of passion, powerful. I love it.
Well, it's also very simplistic and it sounds like it would be easy, but it isn't that easy. But
Yeah.
then, of course, if you seriously look at yourself and ask yourself, what are the talents that I have that could get me through life and possibly put food in my mouth and shelter over my head? Then it becomes like getting really practical about it. You know, I really can't be a doctor, you know, and I can't do this and I can't do that. But yeah, but maybe I could do this. And if I taught school, then I would have an income and I'd have a little time to make work and I would have a shelter and I could feed myself and, you know, I could, you know, you just figure it out. You figure it out and then you just don't have to stop.
Exactly. I love the way you speak. You know, it's slow, but you feel there's a power. I feel very motivated. Yeah.
I don't feel like a really powerful person, but I feel like a committed person.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just like to tell you my feeling. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I like it.
So what do you do?
I'm an architect. I'm also an artist.
Ah,
Yeah.
my dad was an architect.
Ah,
We
great.
did not get along.
Yeah. Wow. I guess I have to get along with myself.
No, it's a related field, especially to sculpture. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way that you you know, you deal with the material. Yeah. So
Thank you.
cool.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny.
Yeah.
Another question from Helen. When we reopen our museum, I would love to have our elementary students help make sit-upons for our galleries. Are they hard to make?
No, they're just a grid. And then you fold in the edges, the ends back on themselves so they won't pull out. If she's interested, we could have a conversation. I could show her how to do it. It's not hard at all. I mean, we did it when we were 8 years old. So.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I was thinking we've done projects when we tour your sculpture. We've done projects related to your sculpture for fourth grade classes that in the Long Beach School District. And the next time we tour your sculpture, we do a project related to you. I think that would be a nice project to do. And then that's something we could use in our gallery.
Yes, I mean, because you can put these things on the wall too. I mean, you can make them like murals and you can read them literally and you can stack them and sit on them, or you can leave them and walk on them, I guess. You know, they're very interesting little grids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are they like the placemats or the things that from certain cultures? I'm thinking in terms of certain African cultures where they do those weavings and mats that they use.
Well, all I know is that when I was in Campfire Girls, which is based on Native American history and culture, we made them. And then at the end of the day, we would sit on them and have our meetings, you know, our end of day meetings. And that's all I know. So it's fun to make them in a way because, you know, you just kind of zone out and just start making all these grids. It's interesting.
Well, it's like twisting the newspapers.
Yeah, exactly.
Students love doing that too, and making hair for their identity masks.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
We have a question from Stacia. You can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I had my hand up in the little thing, but it's such a small, tiny hand that you probably didn't. Anyway, thank you, Maren or Maren? It's
Maren.
Maren, thank you. And I'm new to the world of art. I'm the visitor services coordinator for the Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum, and I saw on one of the slides for wind. I was interested to know, this is kind of a non-art related question, but I saw that it was featured at Spelman College, and I have several friends that go to, or that are alumni of Spelman College. And
that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I was wondering, you said you did with your daughter, so is there a connection that you have with Spelman College at all?
No, I mean, they asked me, they were actually the kickoff show that started my career into its last place.
Wow.
So they were very influential. They gave me this full-on retrospective that had video, it had old work, new work, it had work on the walls, it had work where I collaborated with Senga and some other people.
Oh.
It had everything, highlights from my career.
Oh, wow, man.
Yeah. And that big gallery is there. It's like very big, and it has spacious and airy and quite with natural light and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to visit there last year, but I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to see.
Well, it was probably now maybe more than 4 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have really good shows. They have professional curatorial practices there, and
yeah. Okay. No, I really enjoyed the branches. I didn't think that was going to be my favorite part, but when it came up, I'm like, oh, branches. But
yeah, branches are terrific. They're out there. They're free. You can usually find places that are getting rid of, you know, tree cuttings for the day, and you can make everything with them. I think maybe one of the first things I made was to cover a ceiling with branches. Wow. And then I called it Blanket of Branches, and it was very soothing to have that, you know, those branches all over the ceiling. It was very soothing.
Oh my goodness. And I just love how it's like you think of branches as being so obtuse and sort of everywhere, but the way that you brought them together, they just blend. Even in a circle is just really beautiful. So I can see why that homeless guy decides to make a home.
He was having fun in there. Yeah, with his blanket and his bottle. He was set. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you answering my question.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Lorraine Molina. You're very welcome, Lorraine.
Maren, is there a material you wouldn't use?
Yeah, I don't like toxic materials. I don't like well, anything that you have to use a mask for and all of that, I get very upset about. And then I was thinking, well, if I want to talk about nature, then I should use objects from nature, like branches and leaves and, you know, and newspapers, which are made from, you know, squashed up things that are not particularly toxic. So, so I kind of stayed with that. And, you know, what's strange about it is I always thought, well, if you use these kind of materials, then, you know, you're going to have to throw them away after a while, and it's not going to work. You know, you'll have to constantly be replacing them. And that actually hasn't happened. I mean, the things that we're learning in art school a lot of the times are kind of outmoded information, like, you know, you use your oil paint this way, and you have to use oil paint if you want this kind of luminosity or this color scheme or something. But, you know, that's based on like old knowledge with old materials. And I think there's, you know, there's always new stuff coming along, and there's old stuff that hasn't been tried. So it just depends, you know, some people don't mind the smell of oil paint, but it drives me crazy. I can't stand the smell of the solvents. So, you know, I had to find something else. Also, I'm not good. I'm not, as far as painting goes, I'm not too good. Anyhow, I like physical stuff. Yeah.
We have another question from Lenny. If there is no budget limit, what kind of project would you do?
No budget limit. Oh my goodness. I think I would try to do something that included a whole lot of people and get a whole lot of people paid. You know, maybe it would be made of people somehow, and it would be more performative, and everybody would get a paycheck at the end of the night. You know,
That's cool.
yeah. I mean, it sounds good. I don't know what it would be like. I'd be pandemonium. But can you imagine anything that a whole bunch of people would like to do together?
Not right now.
Wonderful.
Right now, in this environment, right now, what would a bunch of people like to do together? What could be, you know, a good thing for a bunch of people to get together and do?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So what kind of message, you know, if there's no budget limit, you know, what kind of message do you like to tell this world?
Well, that's what I mean. Then I could have unlimited number of people, right? And one of the issues that came up in the latest political campaign is how people don't have health insurance and people don't get a proper wage, and everybody's out of work because of the pandemic and nobody's getting a job. And, you know, so pay people to be in an art project, and then let the art project have, I guess, political messages. Or I don't like to think of them as political messages. I like to think of them as like survival messages, like we need to eat, we need shelter, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, very meaningful.
Well, it would be if it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just curious, you know, because I think this question can let you understand what, you know, you think art is and what your ideal is. So that's, you know, that's why I have this question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I think it's important that, you know, if you find you have this ability and it's helped you and your family get through, you know, your life to a certain extent, and then there's so much difficulty, you know, everywhere. This whole pandemic thing is so insane.
Yes.
And you see people suffering. Well, you would want to help out. I mean, you want to help out. It's not unusual, I don't think. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I like it.
We have another message from Christina. This is such a great honor to be able to hear from you about your work that we have loved for so long. I'm wondering how you feel about folks replicating your work in an effort to understand your practice, like we do with students, families, and community visitors.
That's fine. You know, that's fine. I mean, when you're in art school, you copy master drawings and paintings. So, you know, you do it because you like it and you're trying to understand it. Sometimes helps you understand things a lot better if you copy them. I mean, I'm sure everybody's had the experience of copying drawings, you know, or yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, we did recreate the love sculpture. And I think that was a point with the, what we did it with pink balloons, but
But
so
what shape was it?
it was kind of however the kids could reach. So this was fourth graders who, when we told them about it in the classroom, they just fell, they just, oh, we want to do that. We want to do that. So when they visited, they all got a balloon and a lot of them didn't know how to blow it up. They wrote a message to someone in their family or someone special, put it in the balloon, that's the human breath. They got it once they did it, you know, it brought it to life for them. And I think that's what we like to do, is have that experience to really get what you're getting at, right? How the breath fills the shape. And then when all the balloons deflated, we left it all up. I have all the notes.
Oh, great.
That they put in. And they were so beautiful. Just, you know, writing to mom and dad how they loved them, or brothers and sisters, or best friends. That they really did it, because you didn't know what they were really doing on the note, right? Are they really doing this? But they were serious.
Oh, that's so great. That would be wonderful, just to put those together and photograph the notes.
Yep. we saved them.
Yeah.
But we always wonder, I thought, well, you know, should we be doing this? Because this is her work, right?
Well, yeah, but you know, you in art school, you copy master painters and draftsmen and draftspeople, you know, that's how you learn.
Right. And I think it really did help by you know, recreating it on their own.
Well, what's really good about that is understanding how emotion is part of art. Yeah. It's not just you know, a design craft, but it has emotional content as possible.
Yeah, thank you. You've been a big inspiration for our programs. I can't even tell you.
I would love to see some of those things.
I'll send you photos. I have photos of it all.
So I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
So
Any more questions?
Yeah, I would see little questions and little commentaries would come up. And so thank you, everybody, even though you haven't actually literally been seen. I want to thank the ghosts out there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Maren. Once again, a big thank you to you and all of our participants. So nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you yourselves. You've been excellent companions for this evening. Thank you.